The hum of the starship Vigilance was a constant, a lullaby of recycled air and thrumming plasma conduits that had soothed Captain Eva Rostova for 20 years. It was the sound of order, of the unyielding peace the Athelian hegemony had imposed upon the galaxy for 5 standard centuries. Her bridge was a testament to that order, a cathedral of polished chrome and holographic displays that glowed with the serene blue of hegemonic authority. From her command chair, she watched the star-dusted velvet of the void slip past. Another routine patrol in the so-called graveyard sector, a patch of space littered with the cosmic debris of long-dead civilizations. It was a boring, but necessary, duty. The graveyard was a reminder of what happened to species that resisted the hegemony's enlightened expansion. Rostova's ancestors had been on the right side of that history, joining the hegemony early and rising through its ranks. Her family crest, a stylized nova burst, was stitched proudly onto the collar of her crisp gray uniform. She adjusted her collar, the fabric stiff against her neck, and took a sip of the bitter, black calf that was her only vice. Her first officer, a lanky reptilian Xylosian named Kael, shimmered beside her, his scales catching the blue light. "Anything on long range?" "Kael," she asked, her voice calm, measured. It was a question she asked 100 times a shift, and the answer was always the same. "Negative, Captain," he hissed softly, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "The dead remain dead. Silence reigns." But today, the silence was broken. A proximity alert, low and insistent, chirped from the comm station. Rostova sat up straighter, her calf forgotten. Proximity alerts were rare out here. Rogue asteroids, maybe a lost cargo drone, but never anything of substance. "On screen," she commanded. The main view screen flickered, the star field replaced by a magnified image. It was a ship, when unlike any she had ever seen. It was small, a fighter by its silhouette, but its design was brutally angular, devoid of the elegant, sweeping curves favored by hegemonic engineers. Its hull was a matte black that seemed to drink the light, making it look like a void in space itself. There were no running lights, no transponder signal, no energy signature that matched any known vessel in the Galactic registry. It was a ghost. "Magnify further," Rostova ordered, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drum against her ribs. "Scan for life forms, any residual energy." The image sharpened. The ship was heavily damaged, its port side scarred with deep, molten gashes that glowed with a faint, residual heat. A gaping hole was torn in its cockpit, and through it, the sensors picked up a single, fading life sign. "Life form is anomalous, Captain," the sensor tech reported, his voice tight with confusion. "Biological readings are unstable, but the genetic marker, they don't match any species on record, except..." He trailed off, rerunning the diagnostic. "Except what?" Lieutenant Rostova pressed, her patience thinning. "They're a 99.8% match for a species in the historical archives, a species classified as extinct." Kyle's head tilted, his large, golden eyes blinking slowly. "Extinct? Which one?" The lieutenant swallowed hard, turning away from his console to face her directly. His face was pale. "The designation is human, Captain, from the planet designated Sol 3, Earth." A chill, cold and sharp as vacuum, traced its way down Rostova's spine. Humans. It was a name spoken only in history lessons, a cautionary tale about a primitive, violent race that had foolishly defied the hegemony during the Great Expansion Wars 500 years ago. They had been pacified, erased. Their homeworld, a vibrant blue marble according to the archives, had been rendered a scorched, uninhabitable rock. The official record was clear there were no survivors. "That's impossible," Rostova said, her voice a low whisper. "Double-check your readings. It must be a corrupted file, a sensor ghost." But she knew it wasn't. The fear in the lieutenant's eyes was real. The silent, black ship drifting before them was real. "The life sign is fading fast, Captain," the tech urged. "And the ship's reactor is critical. It's going to breach in minutes." Rostova's mind raced. Hegemonic protocol was clear. Unidentified vessels were to be neutralized on sight. An extinct species reappearing was an anomaly of the highest order, a threat to the stability the hegemony had bled to create. She should give the order. "Fire a torpedo. Destroy it." The words formed in her mind, but they wouldn't leave her lips. Instead, she heard herself say, "Launch a short-range drone. I want a visual from inside that cockpit before it blows." Kyle looked at her, his expression unreadable, but he relayed the order without question. A small, spherical drone detached from the Vigilance's underbelly, its thrusters firing silently as it zipped toward the ghost ship. The drone's camera feed filled a secondary screen on the bridge. It navigated through the breach in the cockpit, the lens slick with a thin film of frozen atmosphere. Inside, the scene was one of utter devastation. Wires sparked, consoles were shattered, and the air was thick with a fine, metallic dust. The pilot was slumped in their chair, held in place only by a set of crude, 5-point restraints. The drone's light passed over them. They were humanoid, covered in a dark, form-fitting flight suit. Their helmet shattered on one side. The drone moved closer, focusing on the exposed face. It was pale, smeared with blood and grime, but undeniably human. Short, dark hair was matted to their forehead. The drone's light seemed to stir them. The pilot's head lolled to the side, and for a heart-stopping moment, their eyes fluttered open. They were a deep, defiant green, and they stared directly into the drone's camera, into Rostova's soul. A flicker of a smirk touched the pilot's lips, a gesture of pure, unadulterated defiance in the face of death. Then, their eyes rolled back, and the light in them went out. At that exact moment, a new alert screamed through the bridge. "Captain, multiple energy signatures detected. They just dropped out of slip space. All around us." Rostova tore her eyes from the drone feed, her blood running cold. The main view screen changed, showing a tactical grid. Dozens of new contacts had appeared, surrounding the Vigilance in a perfect, suffocating sphere. They were all identical to the ghost ship, sleek, black, and utterly silent. No hails, no warnings. "Shields to maximum charge weapon capacitors, Kale. Get me a line to sector command. Now!" But it was too late. Before Kale could even acknowledge the order, the human ships moved. They didn't fire conventional lasers or plasma bolts. Instead, thin, impossibly precise beams of white light lanced out from each fighter, converging on a single point on the Vigilance's ventral hull. It wasn't an attack. It was surgery. The beams sliced through the tri-weave alloy like it was parchment, cutting a perfect circle around the ship's primary reactor core. Alarms shrieked as the containment field collapsed. "They're not trying to destroy us," Rostova breathed, a horrifying understanding dawning on her. "They're disabling us." The human fleet moved with a predatory grace, a coordinated dance of death that spoke of centuries of practice. They were a pack of wolves, and the Vigilance, one of the hegemony's proudest destroyers, was the lumbering, cornered prey. As her ship went dark, the emergency lights casting long, terrifying shadows across the bridge. Rostova watched the ghost ship finally succumb to its wounds. Its reactor blew, but it wasn't a violent explosion. It was a silent, brilliant flash of blue-white light, a funeral pyre in the unending dark. And in that final, blinding flash, Rostova understood. This wasn't a random encounter. It was a message. The pilot, the dying ship, it was all bait. They had been drawn in, studied, and then, with chilling precision, dismantled. The humans weren't just alive. They had been watching, and they had learned. A single, fleet-wide transmission cut through the chaos, overriding the Vigilance's dead comm system. It wasn't a voice. It was a sound, a piece of audio from the historical archives. It was the crackle of fire, the roar of collapsing cities, the faint, distorted sound of screams. It was the last known recording from the surface of Earth during its pacification. And the recording ended, replaced by a cold, synthesized voice that spoke in perfect, unaccented, hegemonic standard. We remember, then, as quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished, folding into slip space and leaving the Vigilance crippled and silent in the graveyard of empires. They left Captain Eva Rostova adrift, not just in space, but in a terrifying new reality. The ghosts of the past had returned, and the orderly, predictable universe she had dedicated her life to upholding had just been proven to be a 500-year-long lie. The hum of her ship was gone, replaced by a silence that was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of the tomb. Hours turned into a cycle of controlled panic aboard the Vigilance. The silence of the void pressed in, a physical weight on the crippled destroyer. And in that silence, every creak of stressed metal, every frantic report from an engineering team was amplified into a scream. Captain Eva Rostova moved through the red-lit corridors of her ship like a phantom, her face a mask of calm she did not feel. She oversaw the jury-rigging of life support, the rationing of emergency supplies, and the desperate, painstaking effort to coax a single, tight beam distress signal from the mangled comms array. Her crew, a mix of species united under the hegemonic banner, worked with a grim, focused terror. They had seen the impossible. They had been touched by ghosts and left for dead. The Xylosian, Kyle, remained at her side, his usual serpentine grace replaced by a tense, coiled stillness. He had replayed the tactical logs 1,000 times, his golden eyes staring at the holographic replay of the human ships as they danced their ballet of destruction. "Their technology," he hissed, the words barely a whisper. "It does not correlate. The energy frequency of those cutting beams, it's not plasma, not laser. It's something else. Something that shouldn't exist." Rostova knew he was right. The clean, cauterized wounds in her ship's hull were a testament to a science far beyond the hegemony's understanding. It was the technology of a species that had spent 500 years in the dark, doing nothing but honing its hatred into a blade. On the third cycle, a flicker of hope, the distress signal was answered. Long-range hegemonic patrol had picked up their faint cry and was en route, but the response was cold, coded. There were no words of encouragement, no questions about the crew's well-being. There was only a demand for data encryption and a strict order to maintain communication silence until their arrival. Rostova felt a new kind of chill settle in her bones, one that had nothing to do with the failing life support. They were not being rescued, they were being contained. Far away, on the ecumenopolis of Ethel, the gleaming heart of the hegemony, High Executor Valerius watched the data from the Vigilant stream across his private holotable. Valerius was a man carved from marble and arrogance, his lineage tracing back to the hegemony's founding families. He stood in his penthouse office, a spire that pierced the clouds of the capital world, and looked down upon the perfect, geometric order of the city below. The report was an offense, a discordant note in the grand symphony of his ordered galaxy. Humans. The word was a foul taste in his mouth. He dismissed the initial report as a sensor malfunction, then as a clever fabrication by some pirate faction using ancient insignia to spread fear. But the data was undeniable. The genetic markers were the ship designs pulled from classified archives, the chilling audio message. It was them. He clenched his fist, the knuckles white. The return of a dead species was not just a military problem, it was an ideological one. The hegemony was built on the foundation of its own infallibility, on the narrative that its expansion was a manifest destiny that brought peace and enlightenment to a chaotic galaxy. The humans were a loose thread in that grand tapestry, a bloody footnote that was supposed to have been torn out and burned. He made his decision with the speed and finality of a striking viper. The incident in the graveyard sector would be classified to the highest level. The crew of the Vigilance would be isolated. The official report would blame a previously unknown pirate coalition with advanced, salvaged weaponry. A story would be crafted, a narrative of hegemonic strength in the face of a new, cowardly threat. He would not allow the word human to be spoken. He would not allow the ghost to have a name. When the rescue cruiser finally docked with the Vigilance, it was not a meeting of comrades. It was a sterile, almost hostile takeover. Medtechs in sealed environmental suits came aboard, their faces hidden behind polarized visors. They treated the crew not as survivors, but as sources of contamination. Rostova was formally relieved of her command and escorted to the cruiser. Separated from her crew, the journey back to Ethel was made in isolation. Her only company, the silent, armored guards outside her cabin door. When they arrived, she was not taken to a celebratory debriefing or a hospital. She was taken to a gray, featureless room deep within the citadel of hegemonic intelligence. Valerius was waiting for her. He did not offer her a seat. He circled her like a predator, his dark robe sweeping the polished floor. "Captain Rostova," he began, his voice smooth and cold as cryofluid. "You have experienced a traumatic event. Your report is confused. You claim to have encountered a species that has been extinct for 5 centuries. So, Rostova met his gaze, her back straight, her own fury a nascent star building in her chest. "High Executor, I saw it with my own eyes. My crew saw it. My ship's logs are proof." Valerius smiled, a thin, cruel slash of a smile. "Logs can be corrupted. Minds can be broken by the stress of combat. What you saw was a deception, Captain. A clever ruse by terrorists. That is the official conclusion." He paused, letting the finality of his words hang in the air. "You will be given time to recover, to align your memory with the facts. Your loyalty to the hegemony is not in question. Of course, only your clarity. It was a threat wrapped in a silken ribbon. Recant, or be declared unstable. Fall in line, or be broken." She was dismissed, grounded indefinitely and confined to her family's ancestral spire on Ethel. But they had made a mistake. They had given her time. They had given her access to the hegemony's network. And they had underestimated her resolve. The image of the dying human pilot was burned into her mind, the defiant smirk, the green eyes that held no fear, only a terrible, ancient anger. She needed to know why. She began to dig, using the high-level security clearances afforded to the Rostova name. She bypassed the public archives and delved into the deep storage data vaults, the digital catacombs where the hegemony buried its secrets. She searched for files pertaining to the Great Expansion Wars, specifically the campaign in the Sol sector. The official histories were just as she'd learned them in the Academy, a swift, righteous war against a barbaric species that refused the gift of hegemonic citizenship. The pacification of their home world was described as a tragic necessity, a surgical strike to end their aggression. But the deeper she went, the more cracks she found. Redacted casualty reports from hegemonic legions, numbers far too high for a war against a primitive species. Memos detailing the unexpected resilience of Terran technology. And then, a name, appearing again and again in classified communiques Project Legacy. Every file related to it was sealed with the highest security protocols. The digital locks so old and complex they were practically fused shut. It was a ghost in the machine, a secret so deep it had been all but forgotten. While Rostova hunted for the truth in the past, Valerius was shaping the future. He stood before the Grand Council of the Hegemony, his voice resonating with manufactured strength and righteous indignation. He spoke of the cowardly attack on the Vigilance, painting a picture of a new terrorist threat rising from the forgotten corners of the galaxy. He did not speak of humans. He spoke of Sons of Sol, a fanatical cult that worshipped the memory of the dead race, using their symbols to sow chaos. He called for the formation of a new fleet, a weapon of overwhelming power to cleanse the outer sectors and remind the galaxy of the price of defiance. He called it the Purge Fleet, and the Council, their power and comfort threatened, roared their unanimous approval. Back in the cold silence of her apartment, Rostova finally found a key. It wasn't a password or a decryption algorithm. It was a name, cross-referenced in a logistics manifest for a bioweapons research facility that had been decommissioned shortly after the fall of Earth. The head of security for Project Legacy had been a man with a celebrated and decorated name, Admiral Soren Rostova, her own great-grandfather. Revered hero of the Expansion Wars, a cold dread, far more profound than anything she had felt in the graveyard, washed over her. This wasn't just a hegemonic secret, it was a family secret. Using her ancestors' archived biometric data as a key, she pushed against the final firewall. For a moment, she thought it would hold. Alarms she couldn't hear likely screamed through the intelligence network. But then, with a soft digital click, the seal broke. She only had a moment before the system would realize its error and shut her out. She couldn't download the whole file. It was massive. She grabbed the first data packet she could isolate, a personal log entry from Admiral Rostova, dated just weeks after Earth's official pacification. The Admiral's voice, digitized and tinny with age, filled her silent room. It was not the voice of a triumphant hero. It was heavy, weary, and laced with a chilling horror. The orbital bombardment was effective, the voice said. The planet is a cinder, but the High Executor's orders are absolute. No survivors, no witnesses. We thought we had them all. We were wrong. Scanners picked up. Orcs. Dozens of them. Small, primitive slip-space vessels. Launched in the final moments of chaos. They scattered like seeds in the wind. Running dark. We couldn't track them all. The official record will state that the species is extinct, but I know the truth. The log entry glitched, corrupted by age. But one last, clear sentence cut through the static. We did not just commit genocide. We created ghosts. And one day, they will come home to haunt us all. The connection severed. Her access was revoked. Red lights flashed on her console. indicating a system-wide security lockdown of her credentials. But it didn't matter. She had the truth, or at least the beginning of it. The hegemony hadn't just lied. It had performed a monstrous act and then spent 500 years praying no one would ever find the graves. Her great-grandfather had been part of it. Her entire lineage, her entire identity, was built upon that monstrous but galactic lie. She was no longer just a disgraced captain of the hegemonic fleet. She was the descendant of a war criminal and the inheritor of a terrible truth. And outside her window, the perfect, orderly city of Ethel gleamed, oblivious. But Rostova knew it was just a facade, a beautiful, fragile shell built over a pit of bones. The ghosts were home and the haunting had just begun. The gilded cage of the Rostova spire became a prison. Every comfort the auto chef that replicated her favorite meals, the panoramic view of Ethel's perfect cityscape, the silent hum of its advanced climate control felt like a mockery. Eva Rostova was adrift in a sea of luxurious isolation, haunted by the digital ghost of her great-grandfather and the defiant green eyes of a dead man. The truth was a poison, and it was remaking her from the inside out. Her uniform, once a source of immense pride, now hung in her closet like the shed skin of a former self. The hegemony she had served was a lie, its piece a monument built on a foundation of genocide. She was a warden in her own home, her comms monitored, her movements tracked. But Valerius and his intelligence network had underestimated the resources of a family that had been at the heart of the hegemony for centuries. They monitored her official channels, but they did not know about the old ways, the encrypted peer-to-peer networks the founding families had used before the modern galactic internet, back when they were still rivals and not yet masters. She found what she was looking for in a dusty corner of her family's private server, a contact. A name associated with off-the-books cargo hauling and a reputation for discretion. Gren. He was a grizzled Zentradi, a species of hulking, four-armed beings known for their pragmatism. He had run security on one of her father's freighters decades ago, before a disagreement over hegemonic shipping tariffs saw him quit and go independent. He owed her family no love, but he valued currency, and the access codes to a forgotten Rostova commodities account were a currency he would understand. Her message was simple, transmitted over a signal that bounced through a dozen dead relays before reaching his battered freighter, the stray dog. It contained only a set of coordinates for a derelict loading dock in Ethel's industrial undersprawl and a two-word message, cargo transfer. She knew he would understand the implication the cargo was her. While Rostova plotted her escape, High Executor Valerius was solidifying his power. The Sons of Soul narrative had been a resounding success. Fear was a potent tool, and he wielded it with surgical precision. In the Grand Council, he pushed through the emergency powers mandate, granting him unprecedented authority to command the newly christened Purge Fleet. His first act was to summon Inquisitor Kalen, the cold and ruthlessly efficient head of the hegemonic intelligence's Internal Affairs Division. Kalen was a Charn, a species whose pale, featureless faces and black, unblinking eyes gave them the appearance of death masks. He moved with a liquid grace that was utterly silent. "Captain Rostova is a loose thread," Valerius said, his back to the Inquisitor as he watched the first of the massive, obsidian-hulled purge destroyers lift from Ethel's orbital shipyards. "She has been compromised. Her family name makes a public trial inconvenient. Ensure she is no longer a factor. Make it look like an accident. An act of terrorism, perhaps. It would be useful." Kalen bowed his head, a gesture that conveyed perfect obedience and a complete absence of morality. "It will be done, High Executor." As Kalen melted back into the shadows of the Citadel, the Purge fleet received its first orders. They were not sent to the graveyard sector. They were sent to the Verge, a string of independent colony worlds that had long chafed under hegemonic trade regulations. Their official mission to root out suspected Sons of Soul sympathizers. Their real mission was to make an example, to remind the galaxy that the price of even a whisper of dissent was annihilation. The industrial undersprawl of Ethel was a world away from the gleaming spires above. Here, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and hot metal, a perpetual twilight beneath the city's massive support structures. Disguised in the drab gray coveralls of a maintenance worker, her hair tucked under a cap, Eva blended into the shadows and the steam that vented from colossal pipes. She found the stray dog docked in a forgotten bay, its hull a patchwork of mismatched plates and scorch marks. The ship looked like it was held together by rust and stubbornness. Gren was waiting at the bottom of the ramp, his lower set of arms crossed over his massive chest, his upper set cleaning a plasma coil with a greasy rag. "Been a long time, little Rostova," he rumbled, his voice like grinding rocks. "You've got a hell of a nerve, calling in a marker like this." "I need to get to the graveyard sector. Gren, no questions, no logs." He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "The graveyard, nothing out there but scrap and ghosts. And now, hegemonic patrols wouldn't. I hear. Whatever you're running from, you're running straight into a war zone." He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on the hard, determined set of her jaw. He saw not the pampered daughter of a noble house, but the cornered officer he remembered from years ago. He sighed, tossing the rag aside. "The account you opened is persuasive. Get aboard. But if Kalen's hounds show up, you're on your own." As the stray dog's engines whined to life and it lifted into the grimy sky of the undersprawl, Eva felt the first true moment of relief she'd had in cycles. She was free. But as the ship slipped into the chaos of a commercial shipping lane and powered toward the slipspace jump point, a klaxon blared from the cockpit. "We've been flagged," Gren growled. "Internal affairs override. They're sealing the sector." On the view screen, the serene blue lights of hegemonic patrol craft blinked to a hostile, pulsing red. They were closing in, far across the galaxy, in a place that did not exist on any star chart. A black fighter designated Echo slipped through a shimmering, cloaked entryway and into the heart of an asteroid. The interior had been hollowed out, transformed into a bustling, hidden city of interconnected caverns and zero-G thoroughfares. Amber lights cast a warm glow on walls of raw rock and repurposed starship plating. This was Sanctuary, the largest of the human ghost colonies. In the cockpit of the Echo, Jorik exhaled, the tension of his long-range scouting mission bleeding out of him. He was young, his face sharp and intense, his knuckles scarred from 100 simulated dogfights. He was born in the dark, a child of the diaspora, and the memory of Earth was not a history lesson to him. It was a sacred text, a vow of vengeance he had taken with his first breath. He docked his fighter and made his way to the central cavern, a massive dome known as the Hearth, where a holographic projection of a shattered Earth hung in the center. A constant, silent reminder. An old woman was waiting for him. Alara was one of the few who remembered the taste of Earth's air, her face a roadmap of grief and survival. She was the leader of the Reclaimers. "Your report," she asked, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of command. "The hegemony is moving," Jorik said, his voice tight. They're calling us the Sons of Soul, a lie to cover their fear. They've launched a new fleet, the Purge Fleet. It's heading for the Verge. Alara's expression tightened. They hunt shadows to avoid facing the light. What of the captain of the Vigilance? Rostova. Disgraced. Confined to the capital. The hegemony is burying her, and the truth, along with her. Alara looked at the shattered earth. A lie can only be buried for so long before its roots crack the foundations of the world above. They think her silenced, but a person with nothing left to lose is not an asset that can be controlled. Keep a watch on her. Her path may yet intersect with our own. Aboard the stray dog, there was no path but forward. Hold on, Gren yelled, slamming the throttle to maximum. The old freighter groaned in protest as he threw it into a series of bone-jarring maneuvers, weaving through the dense commercial traffic. Last bolts from the patrol craft stitched across their stern, vaporizing a cargo container full of luxury textiles just meters from their port engine. Eva, strapped into the co-pilot seat, found her old instincts taking over. They're trying to box us in, force us toward the customs checkpoint, she said, her voice steady, her eyes scanning the tactical display. Veer left, Vector 315. Use that gas hauler as cover. Gren grunt, his four hands a blur across the controls. The freighter lurched, its artificial gravity plating groaning as it dove under the immense belly of a methane tanker. The patrol craft were forced to pull back, their weapons unable to get a clean lock. Jump drive is almost charged, Gren said, sweat beading on his brow. Just need a few more seconds of clear space. You won't get it, Eva said, her eyes fixed on the long-range sensor display. A new contact was screaming toward them. An Imperial intelligence interceptor, faster and more heavily armed than the patrol boats. It was Kalen. He was coming for her personally. As the interceptor closed the distance, a new series of alerts scrolled across Eva's screen. It was an open-band news feed, broadcasting from the Verge. The image was shaky, terrified. A colony, a peaceful agricultural world, was burning. The obsidian ships of the Purge fleet hung in the sky, their weapons firing indiscriminately into civilian centers. The news anchor's voice was choked with terror. They're not asking questions. They're just cleansing. Eva stared in horror. This wasn't a mission to hunt terrorists. It was a pogrom. Valerius wasn't just trying to erase the humans. He was using their return as a pretext to terrorize the galaxy into absolute submission. Her personal quest for the truth, her desire to understand her family's sin, suddenly felt impossibly small. This was bigger than her, bigger than her family, bigger even than the ghosts of Earth. This was about the soul of the galaxy. Now, she said, her voice cold steel. Jump, Gren, now. The freighter lurched as it tore a hole in space-time, the stars outside the viewport stretching into streaks of white light. They had escaped. But they were not running from a personal threat anymore. They were running from a fire that threatened to consume everything. And they were heading straight for the place where it had all begun. The slipspace journey was a disorienting, non-existent passage through folded reality. For Eva Rostova, it was a moment of suffocating stillness to confront the inferno she had witnessed on the newsfeed. The Verge was burning. Families who had known nothing but peace for generations were being incinerated by the Purge fleet, all because Valerius needed a monster to justify his new iron fist. The lie had taken on a life of its own, and it was consuming the galaxy. Gren left her to her silence, his four hands expertly guiding the stray dog through the chaotic currents of the slipstream. He was a creature of simple transactions, but even he seemed subdued by the casual brutality they had seen. He had lived his life in the gray margins of hegemonic law, but this was a new kind of darkness, stark and absolute. When the freighter finally shuddered back into real space, the contrast was jarring. They had left a galaxy on fire and arrived in a tomb. The graveyard sector was vaster and more desolate than she remembered from her patrol. It was a three-dimensional tapestry of wreckage, the skeletal remains of warships from a dozen forgotten conflicts, all caught in a slow, silent dance around a collapsed star. Light from a distant nebula painted the twisted metal in hues of blood red and ghost white. And there, amidst the debris, was the Vigilance. Her ship, her former life. It was a derelict, its hull scarred by the humans' precise cuts, its running lights dark, a monument to the day her universe cracked open. "Found your ghost ship," Gren rumbled from the pilot's chair, his voice low. "Now what? We planning on poking it with a stick until more of its friends show up?" Before Eva could answer, it happened. The stray dog's power flickered and died. The low hum of the engines, the glow of the consoles, the very life of the ship was snuffed out in an instant, plunging them into the red glow of emergency lighting. Alarms that should have been screaming were eerily silent. "EMP?" Eva asked, her training kicking in as she unstrapped herself. Gren was already running a diagnostic on a backup power cell. "No," he growled. "Not an EMP. That's a system kill. Precise. Targeted. They're not trying to disable us. They're dissecting us from a distance." Outside the viewport, the void shifted. The blackness between the wrecks deepened, coalesced, and then resolved into shapes. One moment there was nothing. The next, a dozen human fighters, identical to the one she'd seen die, had decloaked in a perfect sphere around them. They hung there, motionless and menacing, their black hulls drinking the nebular light. A single and focused beam of white light shot from the lead fighter, not at the ship, but a few meters in front of the cockpit viewport. A hologram flickered to life in the vacuum of space, a projected image of a young man in a pilot suit, his face sharp and radiating a cold, coiled fury. It was Jorik. "Hegemonic trash." His voice crackled through their speakers, bypassing the dead comm system entirely. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you've returned to the scene of your crime before we vent your atmosphere into this junkyard." Eva moved to the comms panel, ignoring its dead state. She knew they could hear her. "My name is Eva Rostova," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I am the former captain of the GDS Vigilance. I am not here under hegemonic authority. I am a fugitive." Jorik's hologram smirked, a bitter, humorless expression. "A fugitive? How convenient." "Did you get a slap on the wrist for losing your shiny destroyer? Now you've come back to finish the job. The hegemony is lying to you." Eva pressed on, her voice rising with an urgency that was not feigned. "They're lying to everyone. They call you the Sons of Saul. They've launched a purge fleet. They just burned the colonies in the Verge, slaughtered thousands of civilians, using you as their excuse." There was a flicker of something in Yorik's eyes, not surprise, but a dark confirmation. He already knew. "And why should we care about the hegemony's internal squabbles?" He shot back. "They're all the same to us. All butchers." "Because I know the truth," Eva yelled, slamming her fist on the dead console. "Not just about this, about everything. About Earth. I know about Project Legacy." The name hung in the silence between the ships. For the first time, the cold certainty in Yorik's expression faltered. The hologram flickered, and a new voice came through the speakers. ancient and calm, yet laced with the authority of ages. "Bring them in," the voice of Alara commanded. The human fighters did not escort them. Instead, a tractor beam, far more powerful and stable than any hegemonic design, locked onto the stray dog and pulled it effortlessly through the debris field. Gren could only watch, his 4 hands limp at his sides. "Well," he muttered, "this is either the best or the last drink I'm ever going to buy you." They were pulled not toward a ship or a station, but toward one of the largest asteroids in the field, a misshapen hunk of rock kilometers in diameter. A section of the rock seemed to dissolve, revealing a shimmering energy field that hid a massive hangar bay. As they were drawn inside, the field closed behind them, and the vast, silent tomb of the graveyard sector was replaced by the low, vibrant hum of a hidden city. Sanctuary. It was a marvel of desperation and genius. Caverns were linked by transit tubes. Farms lit by artificial suns clung to the rock walls. And the central cavity housed thousands of people moving with a quiet, determined purpose. It was a living, breathing testament to 500 years of survival in the dark. Eva and Gren were met at the ramp by armed guards in the same matte black armor as the pilots. They were led through the bustling caverns to the hearth, the command center where the holographic ghost of a shattered Earth spun slowly, a constant, silent accusation. Alara stood before it, her back to them. She was smaller than Eva expected. Her frame stooped with age, but her presence filled the vast chamber. "Project Legacy," Alara said, turning to face them. Her eyes, a pale, piercing blue, seemed to see right through Eva's uniform, her name, her history, and into the core of her intent. "A name I have not heard spoken in centuries. A name whispered by our grandparents as they died in the cold of space, fleeing your fleets. Your name is Rostova." Admiral Soran Rostova was the butcher who oversaw the final bombardment. "You come here bearing his name? Speaking of secrets, explain yourself." Eva stood her ground, meeting the old woman's powerful gaze. "My great-grandfather was a monster," she said, her voice raw with the shame of her discovery. "But in his guilt, he left a record. I found his private log. He confessed. He confirmed the hegemony didn't just pacify Earth. They tried to hunt down and exterminate the survivors, the ones who escaped in the Orcs." She pulled a small data chip from her pocket. "It's all here. The logs, the casualty reports they buried, the true history of their crimes." She held it out, not as a peace offering, as a confession. Her family's confession. Yorick stepped forward, his hand on the sidearm at his hip. "It's a trick, a hegemonic ploy to infiltrate and destroy us." Alara raised a hand, silencing him. She looked at Eva, then at the data chip, and finally at Gren, who simply shrugged with his upper 2 arms. "The truth has a weight," Alara said softly. "Lies are light. They float away. This feels heavy." She motioned for a technician, who took the chip and slotted it into a console. A moment later, the weary, static-filled voice of Admiral Soran Rostova echoed through the human command center. "We did not just commit genocide. We created ghosts. And one day, they will come home to haunt us all." A profound, stunned silence fell over the hearth. For the humans, it was the first time they had ever heard their history confirmed by the voice of their enemy. For Eva, it was the final, painful severing of her past. She was no longer a Rostova of the hegemony. She was just Eva. Alara's eyes softened with a deep, ancient sorrow. "You have brought us a terrible gift. Eva Rostova, You have given us proof of what we have always known in our bones. And in doing so, you have painted a target on your own back, and now on ours." At that moment, an alarm, sharp and urgent, cut through the cavern. A sensor technician spun around from his console, his face pale. "Commander, Ilara long-range sensors have detected a massive slip-space rupture forming at the edge of the sector. It's a hegemonic fleet. Multiple capital ships. Their energy signatures match the reports from the Verge." Yorick looked from the console to Eva, his eyes burning with renewed suspicion and hatred. "She led them here," he accused. "It was a trap all along." "No," Ilara said, her gaze fixed on the tactical display where the angry red icons of the Purge fleet were appearing like a spreading plague. "She did not lead them here. Her escape simply showed them the way." She turned to Eva, her expression grim. "High Executor Valerius is not a man to leave loose ends. He has sent his Inquisitor, Kalen, to finish what he started." Ilara looked at the holographic Earth, then at the approaching enemy fleet. "He thinks he has come to destroy a nest of terrorists." She then turned her gaze to her people, her voice ringing with 500 years of cold, quiet rage. "Let's show him he has found a nest of dragons." The air in the hearth grew thin and cold, charged with the ozone stench of an impending storm. On the tactical display, the crimson icons of the Purge fleet resolved from a vague cluster into an armada of terrifying scale. At its heart was a ship larger than the others, a blade of polished obsidian designated as the Verdict, Inquisitor Kalen's flagship. He had come not just to destroy, but to pass judgment. His opening salvo was not aimed at the asteroid. It was a demonstration of methodical cruelty. His destroyers moved with the cold precision of a surgeon's tools, vaporizing the crippled, drifting hull of the Vigilance in a silent, blossoming flower of white-hot plasma. It was a message to Eva: your past is erased. There is no going back. Then, they turned their attention to the asteroid field itself, firing broad, sweeping volleys of disruption charges, designed not to destroy the wreckage, but to shake anything hiding within it loose, like a predator beating the tall grass to flush out its prey. Inside Sanctuary, the rock shuddered. Red emergency lights bathed the caverns in a bloody glow as the city's inhabitants rushed to their posts. The practiced calm of 5 centuries in hiding was fracturing under the brute force of the hegemony's war machine. Yorick, his face a mask of fury, turned on Eva. "This is your fault. They fight with your tactics, your formations. Then let's use that against them." Eva countered, her voice cutting through the rising panic. She strode to the tactical table, her years of hegemonic command training surging to the forefront. She was no longer a fugitive. She was a captain again, albeit on a different bridge. Kalen is an Inquisitor. He believes in order above all else. His fleet is a perfect geometric instrument. He expects us to fight like pirates, chaotic, desperate strikes. He expects fear. She pointed to the screen, her finger tracing patterns Jorick and the others couldn't see. But his perfection is a weakness. It has no room for true chaos. The graveyard isn't just cover. It's a weapon. We don't fight his fleet. We make the graveyard fight it for him. Ilara watched Eva, her ancient eyes weighing the disgraced captain's words. She saw the truth in them. Vengeance was a fire that would burn them out. But strategy, cold and precise, was a blade that could find a heart. "Give her command of the tactical overlay," Ilara ordered. Yorick stiffened. But a sharp look from Alara silenced his protest. He watched, simmering, as Eva began to issue commands, her voice resonating with an authority that was both foreign and undeniable. Her plan was not one of grand battle, but of 1,000 small cuts a death by haunting. The first wave of human fighters, the Echoes, did not engage. They skirted the edges of the battle, acting as spotters. Eva, cross-referencing their live data with her knowledge of hegemonic fleet doctrine, began to orchestrate the chaos. "That destroyer on the flank," she commanded, her voice broadcast to the hidden defense platforms scattered throughout the asteroid field. Its forward shields are angled to deflect asteroid impacts. Hit it from below with a focused magnetic pulse, a hidden emitter, built into the spine of a long-dead leviathan of a warship. Fired. The hegemonic destroyer didn't explode. Its navigational system simply went haywire as the magnetic pulse tore through its unshielded underbelly. The ship listed hard, its pilot fighting the controls as it was inexorably drawn into the gravitational pull of a dense wreckage clusters. It crashed, not with a bang, but with the sickening, metallic crunch of a tomb being sealed. One by one, Eva's traps were sprung. She used the ghosts of the graveyard as her soldiers. An ancient reactor core, overloaded by a remote signal, vented a cloud of radioactive plasma, blinding a squadron of enemy fighters. A carefully severed support spar from a derelict space station was sent tumbling into the path of a frigate, puncturing its engine core. The humans did not fight like a fleet. They fought like a poltergeist, and the graveyard was their haunted house. Aboard the Verdict, Kalen watched his perfect formations begin to fray. His emotionless face betrayed nothing, but his commands grew sharper. The enemy was not behaving as the tactical projections had indicated. They were not cowards. They were intelligent, and they were being led by someone who knew his playbook. "Focus all internal sensors on Captain Rostova's last known position," he ordered. "The source of this strategy is the traitor. Eliminate her." On the stray dog, which had been moved to a shielded sub-hangar, Gren watched the battle unfold on a relay screen. He had been paid. He was, technically, free to go if he could find a way out. He watched as a human medical transport, a clumsy, repurposed freighter, took a hit and began venting atmosphere, its engine sputtering. Hegemonic fighters, like sharks smelling blood, moved in for the kill. Gren cursed, his 4 hands balling into fists. He looked at the controls of his ship, then back at the screen. He hadn't signed up for this. He was a businessman, but there were some transactions that cost more than just credits. "Ah, hell," he grumbled to the empty cockpit. "The retirement benefits are terrible anyway." He slammed his 4 palms on the engine ignition controls. The stray dog, a ship designed to haul cargo not fight wars, roared out of the hangar. It was slow, ugly, and had all the grace of a thrown brick. But it was solid. Gren aimed its reinforced bow at the lead hegemonic fighter and pushed the throttle to its breaking point. He smashed through the fighter, his ship groaning in protest, and positioned his freighter's bulk between the crippled transport and the remaining attackers, his hull absorbing the las bolts meant for the wounded. It was a stupid, suicidal, and utterly magnificent gesture. Yorick saw it from his cockpit as he led a squadron on a strafing run. He saw the Zentradi freighter, the ship that had brought the traitor, sacrifice itself to save a human vessel. His comms crackled. It was Eva. "Yorick, Kalen knows I'm here. He's coming for the command center. He's sending his elite guard. You have to intercept." He hesitated, his hatred for her, for her name warred with the grudging respect that had begun to seed in his heart. Then he thought of the Zentradi sacrifice. This was bigger than his hate. "On my way," he clipped, and banked his fighter hard, leading his squadron back toward Sanctuary. The true turning point came when Kalen, frustrated by the Phantom War, made his first critical error. He pushed the verdict deeper into the debris field, determined to get a clear shot at the asteroid. Eva saw it instantly. "He's overextended," she breathed. "His flank is exposed to the old Star Eater's wreckage. Now, Elara, now." Elara stood before a master control panel, her hands hovering over a single glowing rune. "For 500 years, we have lived in this tomb," she said, her voice a low, powerful whisper broadcast to every human in Sanctuary. "We have honored our dead. Today, our dead honor us." She pressed her palm against the rune. Deep within the graveyard, in a terrible awakening occurred. It was not a weapon firing. It was the tomb itself screaming. Elara had spent centuries turning the entire sector into a single, colossal booby trap. In the wrecks of the hegemony's ancient enemies, dormant systems roared to life. Hidden plasma conduits, powered by parasitic generators, latched onto the collapsed star's energy field. Overloaded, hundreds of derelict ships, all rigged to blow, detonated in a synchronized, cascading chain reaction. It was a directed shockwave, a tsunami of shrapnel, radiation, and pure kinetic force, all focused on a single point, the overextended Purge fleet. The hegemonic ships were tossed like toys in a maelstrom. Shields buckled, hulls were shredded by kilometer-long shards of ancient metal. Kalen's perfect formation was shattered into 1,000 pieces of burning chaos. Aboard the bleeding, crippled Verdict, Kalen watched his fleet, his instrument of order, being devoured by the chaos he so despised. He saw Jorik's squadron, flying with Eva's guidance, punch through his failing defenses and score a direct hit on his bridge. As his world dissolved into fire and vacuum, Inquisitor Kalen's last thought was one of pure, cold logic. The ghost had a name, and its name was Rostova. The aftermath was a profound and aching silence. The remnants of the Purge fleet, leaderless and broken, fled into slipspace. The graveyard, once a silent tomb, was now a glittering field of fresh wreckage, a testament to the ferocity of its resurrected dead. The cost had been high. The stray dog was a floating wreck, but Gren had survived, pulled from the cockpit by a grateful human rescue team. Yorick's squadron had suffered losses. Sanctuary itself was scarred, but it had held. The war was not over, but the lie was. Elara had broadcast everything Soren Rostova's confession, footage of the Verge massacre, the unprovoked attack on Sanctuary on every open channel, hijacking the hegemony's own comms grid. The galaxy had seen the truth. Revolts, long simmering in the outer colonies, were now blazing into open rebellion. Valerius's hegemony was fracturing, collapsing under the weight of its own monstrous sins. Days later, Eva stood with Elara and a quiet, humbled Yorick in the hearth. The holographic Earth still spun, but it looked different now. It was no longer just a grave. It was a promise. "The hegemony is tearing itself apart," Yorick said. "They are fighting each other now. What is our next move?" Elara looked at Eva, her pale blue eyes holding not just the sorrow of the past, but the weary hope for a future. "You came to us a fugitive, Eva Rostova. You brought us the truth, and with it, you brought us this war, but you also showed us how to win it. You have a place here, if you want it." Eva looked at the spinning blue marble. the home she had never known, whose ghost she had been sent to patrol. She thought of her family's crest, the nova burst of a dying star. A new symbol came to mind, a world, broken but resilient, seeding new life among the stars. "My name is Ava," she said, her voice clear and strong, finally free of the weight of her past. "And I want to help you go home." Alara nodded, a slow, deep acknowledgement. She turned her gaze back to the hologram, her voice filled with the strength of a people who had survived the long night and now, finally, saw the dawn. "The haunting is over," she declared. "The reclamation begins."